Oh, hey, deserving listeners, it's me, Dr. Kirk Honda. I'm going to react to this show, and yes, I did get a haircut. Thanks for noticing. Let's watch.
I'm very disappointed in you, Ed. What are you doing? What are you doing?
You did her wrong. Her wrong, bad, like bad.
Can you imagine how she feels?
So he's doing that face that he does. I don't know what that face means. I think it's I don't know. There's something about that face that feels like he's distancing or he's thinking something different than what he's saying. I don't know. I could be reading into it, obviously, but it comes across whenever he makes that face, it comes across like he's saying, I hear you criticizing me. I don't agree with it at all. So yeah, you're right. I see it and I'm on board or something. I don't, it's something like that that is off-putting. It also could just be that he agrees, but I don't know. It's interesting that Angela is telling him that he's being a jerk face. That's the one person I didn't expect to have that kind of messaging around, like, can you imagine how she feels? Although I guess Angela might understand how she feels. I think Angela often feels in the way that I think she thinks Liz is feeling right now. So this is interesting.
She's a woman. You're a good guy, man. But I can't accept what you did. What you're doing is wrong.
I know. I don't know. I love her. I want to spend the rest of my life with her, but I don't know how.
You need to talk to her.
I don't know how to do it. I don't know how to do it.
What do you not know how to do? You know it's wrong, right?
I don't know how to be in a relationship.
That's interesting. I think that, who knows, this all could be faked, but I think that it's possible that he legit believes that to be true, that because of his inexperience, he was pretty inexperienced when he was very young. He got married, divorced pretty quick, and then I think he had 30 years where he wasn't dating anyone. Although who knows what really happened during that time. At the very least, he comes across as someone who is pretty inexperienced. So that's one. Two, I think because of his relational traumas, if the data that's being presented is reflective of his personality, which I can't know, but if it is, there's a lot of arrows pointing in the direction of someone that is pretty emotionally confused, pretty emotionally triggered, very reactive, distorted, and runs frequently into, even just with Liz alone, but with lots of people, into many moments where he seems to be self-destructing or misinterpreting, but he's very sure of himself. And then everyone keeps telling him there's something wrong with him. And he's like, but I don't feel like there's something wrong with me. I feel like there's something wrong with others. And that happens. People have schemas. They have personality disorder, or they're on a spectrum of it. They have distortions. And then they run into this point where they're just like, what's wrong with me? Is it me? Is it them? I keep failing. So I think he is speaking from that place right now.
Talk to her, compromise with her. Don't tell her all these mean things, and she may treat you better too. Like it's a two-way street.
I don't do that only when I was cornered. And like I said, I felt like I had everybody coming down on me, and the one person.
That's how you feel.
Right.
Say how you feel.
And you notice how Elizabeth stood behind him, and Liz didn't.
I would never talk to my wife like that. I know Bilal.
Yeah, I think that's where Ed is coming from. That's where he was triggered. That he wanted Liz to stand behind him. Everything was filtered through that, even though arguably she was really doing a lot of work to preserve the relationship in the face of something that was pretty awful, right? He was lying, he was seemingly cheating or something. She was being pretty fair, Liz, in her, by the way, I have allergies right now. I don't know if you could hear it. I'm really stuffed up. Must be dust in the air or something. I think that he was seeing everything through that lens of loyalty, and you could see it as like a control thing. But and again, if this is accurate of his personality, it's reflective of his insecurity, of him frequently or in a constant state walking around feeling like he's going to be abandoned, or he's always being abandoned, or he's being betrayed, or no one really loves him. And so he needs a constant indication that she won't leave him. And even in the face of things that a lot of people would leave, or at the very least draw a concern, I think for Ed, it really gets under his skin, and that's all he can focus on. Also, I think that there's a possibility his coping mechanism has to do with his persona. We could call it narcissism. We could call it self-aggrandizement or trying to come across like he's an awesome, wonderful human being. And on the tell-all, it's being televised, it's in front of a crowd, to be humiliated by your, using this as a jumping off point for people with narcissistic personality traits, whether they have the disorder or not, depends, but they're in that direction. They're desperate for narcissistic supply. They're desperate to be seen in a certain way. And depending on how their narcissism manifests, if you're in relation with someone like that and you enter into a public arena and the narcissistic individual believes you weren't standing behind them or you weren't supporting them or you weren't making them look good, their mood will plummet, because it's one thing to be humiliated in front of you, or they feel humiliated in front of you. It's another thing to be humiliated in front of everyone and to have you, their attachment figure, let them down. They will fall apart. They will feel extremely unregulated. They will feel extremely hurt. They'll feel extremely alone and betrayed. And then they get angry and they go after you. So I think we might have been seeing something like that.
I would never talk to my wife like that. I know Bilal here wouldn't. Andre wouldn't. So don't do it too. Stop this whole back and forth thing. Like, she does something to you, you go back at her. Like, that is not cool. And that's the best point I thought that was brought up in the whole conversation.
Yeah.
So when you hear like, you shouldn't have did, I know I made a big mistake. Don't put it back on her. Like,
wow. I mean, who knows if they edited the whole show differently, but Bilal has literally never done that on the show. He is giving advice that he has seemingly never followed from what they've shown on the show. To admit that he did something wrong, to not put it onto her. I mean, and I wonder if Ed is thinking that right now.
One big happy family.
Are we?
Oh.
Anyways, well, I apologized to Liz last night. I hit below the belt. And I just want to apologize to each and every one of you for my behavior, but I'm upset.
All right, so we're hearing that he apologized to Liz last night, and he's also apologizing to everyone here. He quickly follows it up with but I was emotional. And according to history with Ed, this probably indicates that he's not actually sorrowful and actually sorry. You can say you're sorry, you can say you take full responsibility, you can say you apologize, but that doesn't mean you're actually apologizing. You actually have to demonstrate that you are sorrowful, that you do care, that you do recognize the transgression. If he were to say something like, I recognize that last night, although I was triggered, which isn't an excuse, I became really upsetting and harmful, abusive even, to Liz verbally, and was maybe even unfair to everyone here because y'all were trying to help me with that. So I apologize for all that. If he said something like that, that wouldn't be a super elaborate apology, but that would indicate that he understood the transgression, he understood the impact. But according to history on the show, and we don't know if it's edited this way, but he doesn't actually demonstrate that he's actually sorry. I think he's capable of apologizing halfway or quarter way. I think those kinds of moments are happening hopefully off screen, maybe in therapy. On the show, we don't usually hear that. So we're hearing that he apologized to Liz. We don't know to what extent. I'm guessing we'll find out to what extent, but he's exhibiting that save face, say he's sorry when he's not actually sorry.
But Ed, this apology you gave her was fake as because she told me later.
Okay, first of all, Kimberly, it wasn't fake. I apologize for going below the belt.
So he keeps saying that. I apologize for going below the belt. And again, I don't think that's the transgression that you should be apologizing for. Maybe it is. It depends on the elaboration that he provided Liz, and we weren't there. And he's not apologizing to us. He's apologizing to Liz, and Liz can be the arbiter of whether or not that apology was sufficient or not. But anyway, he's saying that I suspect there's a chance that what he's saying when he's below the belt, that he's minimizing what he did and what he has done to Liz, taking the ring back. Well, right. So, I mean, the whole transgression is quite elaborate. I lied to you extensively for months that I hadn't reached out to Rose. When confronted, I continued to lie to you. Then I put you down and called you crazy and overly jealous when you were just upset that I'd lied to you. That's a massive transgression, and so on and so. I called you a performer. It's not just hitting below the belt.
I'm saying I'm sorry. Kimberly, you seem to think that your doesn't stink.
Oh,
And
no,
it
my
does.
stinks.
Well,
Believe me.
why don't you?
So smokescreen number 1, he does this, he has many different smokescreens. They're not unique to him, of course, but a very common smokescreen for him when he's being confronted. And so the flow chart is probably this, that he's desperate for attachment security. He's desperate to be seen as a good person, as a superior person maybe, but at the very least a good person. And because of his relational traumas, then he gets triggered by Liz the previous night. He gets distorted. He goes on the attack. He feels completely justified because of the perceptual distortions, the disorder. Then he feels like he might have gotten things under control. He feels like he is repairing things. He's like, look, I'm sorry for what happened. Can we just go back to the way things were, where everyone loved me and people weren't attacking me? Then Kim goes after him, and he's starting to feel that pain, and the floor is dropping out from underneath him. I don't know, but I've treated people with this disorder, and when you challenge, they're standing on a basically like rice paper floor. It's probably an exaggeratory metaphor. What would be something that would be very fragile, like quarter-inch plywood floor with joists that are 3 feet apart. You're really on thin ice. Maybe that's a better analogy. They literally have a saying in the English language, you're walking on thin ice. People with this disorder, I don't know if he has this, but I've treated people with this disorder, they're walking on thin ice. And so they're always terrified they're going to, as soon as one crack happens in their persona, in their presentation to others, in their sense of security, everything just falls apart. And, they're scrambling, right? You fall through the ice, you start scrambling. You don't just calmly say, well, how do I get out of this pickle? You freak. And so these individuals will immediately start freaking out. So there's that pain, and then the flowchart goes to, okay, how do I stay afloat? How do I get back onto the thin ice? Well, I have to deny, because that's the only way to get me back on top. And I also have to attack the other person and get them off their game. And I'm very good at that because I have a very practiced way of doing that. He comes across like someone who has a very practiced way of doing that. These individuals, and I've treated people, I know people like this in my personal life, who will seemingly be totally calm, and they can be very frustrating to argue with because they'll be very unreasonable, but they will seemingly make a lot of sense to themselves, and they never get rattled. They never admit they're wrong. You're escalating in your adrenaline because you're not used to it. Like I'll just talk about for myself. When I am arguing with someone like this in my personal life, I'm not used to arguing with people. I don't argue with people. I don't enjoy it. It's not a preference of mine. So I will have adrenaline, and I don't have a lot of practice in just like going after people back and forth. And so I will start to lose control. My voice will start to get, crack or, get wavery. I'll start to feel my heart pounding. I'll start to not know what to say, or I'll get confused. And so that's normal, fight or flight. But for these individuals, they're so used to it. They're also experiencing distress, but they know they've practiced so many times. It's sort of like a soldier going into war. It's like, or a veteran. Yeah, I've been here before. I'm freaking out, of course, but I know what to do. You do this, you do that, you do that. And so these individuals, they engage in this, and it can be very frustrating to talk to them because you end up start believing that it is your fault, that you are the emotional, irrational one, and because they poke. And so that's another tactic, is not only to smokescreen, meaning I need to deflect away from my issues and blame you, but I also know, these individuals know that if they stay calm in because this is their world, this is their arena, and they poke and poke and poke, eventually the other person will completely flip out, and they'll say, look at you, you're You're ridiculous. Your whole argument is ridiculous because look at you. And he did that to Liz. He did it to Rose. And I think he's trying to do it to Kim right now. This episode is sponsored by BetterHelp. Let's talk about self-awareness. I'm often talking about a connection with the self, a connection with who you are, what you want, what you need, this kind of thing. And how for some people, since they weren't attuned to enough as a child, they don't have a strong connection with the self, and therefore they have to go through a lot of therapy to get in connection with the self. But really, I don't know anyone who doesn't cut themselves off from their needs. None of us were 100% attuned to 100% of the time. And of course, that's where therapy can help everybody. And as a therapist, I've witnessed clients discover mind-blowing aspects of themselves that really helped them in their lives. Well, that's where BetterHelp comes in. BetterHelp connects you with a licensed therapist who can take you on that journey of self-discovery wherever you are. It's entirely online. It's designed to be convenient and flexible to your schedule. So discover your potential with BetterHelp. Visit betterhelp.com/Kirk today to get 10% off your first month. That's BetterHelp, HELP.com/Kirk.
You own it.
I do own
And
it.
you're so quick to judge me.
Oh, no.
So be the first one to throw the first stone. You guys.
Oh, no, I wasn't the first one to throw. You threw your own stones.
Whatever.
But I will own my today. I'm not no
I hope so.
bitch. I'm not no little punk. I'm going to own my
Okay, well.
And you didn't own it with her.
What is up with you, Ed?
I'm pissed.
But you treated all of us like
With everything you got.
No, Ed, I told you, you don't do this. You just
Yeah, Kim probably is experienced enough to be able to handle it, and she rolled with it. So he tried to, poke at her and say like, well, you have your problems, and she judoed it or aikidoed it, meaning you go with the movement instead of pushing back. And she says, yeah, I have my issues and I will own it, but you don't. So that really put an end to his attempt at a smokescreen here.
Kimberly, you seem to think that your doesn't stink.
Oh, no,
And
my
does.
stinks.
Well,
Believe me.
well, why don't you own it?
I do own
and
it.
You're so quick to judge me.
Oh, no.
So be the first one to throw the first stone. You guys.
Oh, no, I wasn't the first one to throw. You threw your own stones.
Whatever.
But I will own my today. I'm not no
I hope
bitch.
so.
I'm not no little punk. I'm going to own my
Okay, well.
And you didn't own it with her.
What?
His attempt to rile her up or to get her to say, I don't have any problems, and be like, look, you have a problem too. But that didn't work. And so she just went with it and said, but you didn't, and you haven't. You haven't admitted what you've done wrong. You say you're sorry, but you clearly are not actually sorry.
What is up with you, Ed?
I'm pissed.
But you treated all of us like
With everything you got.
no, Ed, I told you, you don't do this.
Let's
You
try
just
not to. I understand. You feel like everybody just give it to him. But Ed, let me tell you something. If you want loyalty from Liz, you have to give her loyalty.
And I agree 100%. And she knows that. And she knew better. Instead,
Oh my God, I don't even want to hear the rest of that sentence. I don't even. Shida, I think, hit a theme very succinctly, which is identifying that for Ed, he wants loyalty, which everyone wants. We all want that. I feel like in mainstream American society anyway, the circle I run in, the idea of wanting dedication and loyalty from your partner is, it's associated with abuse, right? It's like, I need my partner, my wife, to be loyal to me. I need her to be dedicated to me. Certainly an abusive person could talk that way, but that's abusive loyalty or non-reciprocal or non-mutual or unfair loyalty. I'm loyal to my wife, and she should expect me to be loyal to her. When we are at a gathering, a party or something, and someone starts to talk crap about my wife, I'm loyal to her. I have her back. I am on her side, and I will fight for her. Or if someone asks me a question, and this has happened, and this is something that I noticed early on in our relationship, me and Stacy. When you're at, say, a family gathering or a big get-together, sometimes there'll be or even a small get-together, but there'll be this conversation that will arise where people will start to complain about their partners, or someone will ask about you. Well, so what's an example? Like, someone was frustrated with my wife about something, and it was a family member frustrated with my wife. they asked me, do you ever get frustrated with her in this way, looking to back them up, right? They're like, oh yeah, Stacy, and it wasn't attacking her, but it was illuminating something that was a personality quirk of my wife's. And so they were going after her and saying like, oh yeah, that really is annoying. And it was a light-ish conversation. But anyway, it started to kind of bug me. They asked me, do you agree that Stacy does this thing? And in my head, I'm like, yeah, she does do that thing. But in this forum, I'm not going to throw her under the bus. And I'm not going to lie and say that she doesn't do it. But I'm also not going to participate in this bashing of my wife. And so I will say, and I did, something like, well, one, I'm a shrink. And so I have a way of massaging, reframing data, if you will. So I can't remember what I said, but I agreed. And I said, well, yeah, she does do X, Y, and Z, but I understand why, and it doesn't really bother me, or something like that. There are moments like that, right? Where, and the thing that I noticed about my wife early on is she does that even more than I do. Like I'll overhear conversation. You know, you're at a family gathering or a friend thing, and you overhear a conversation with your spouse, and you will hear them say things that they don't know you're listening. And I had a moment like that early on with my wife where she was defending me. Someone was, I don't know, saying something about me, and she was like, no, even though I absolutely knew or thought that she could have agreed with that other person. Now, is that the only way to live? No. Certainly there are other couples who will express loyalty differently. You can poke fun at each other or say certain things, you know, but it's relevant to what I think Ed is getting into. And so there's absolutely nothing wrong with wanting loyalty and dedication. It is a central feature of attachment and safety, of knowing that people have your back. There's a limit, of course. How are you loyal? How are you dedicated? Is it mutual? Is it by choice? Is it I voluntarily give my loyalty and my dedication to my wife, her back to me. It's not forced, and I certainly don't require her to be loyal or dedicated to me in situations where it would not make sense to her, that kind of thing. So she had to really cut to the core. Said, you want her to be loyal to you. Great. You have to be loyal back. So you were talking to Rose behind her back, or at the very least you were lying, because I think Ed was probably talking to Rose when Liz and Ed were broken up. But then we heard that he was chatting with Rose while he was with Liz, right? Do we remember that right? Anyway, so you want loyalty from her. Great. But you got to be loyal back. All right, well, if you want to become a patron of the podcast, that's the best way to contact me, actually. Your emails, if you're a patron, get preference, because I get a lot of emails because, there's a lot of people with questions, a lot of good questions, and I can only get to a certain amount. And so, I don't know, most of the time I'm just like, well, I'll go to the patrons first, and then I'll get to everyone else later. And sometimes that means I never get to the non-patron questions, unfortunately, which bums me out, legit. So, yeah. But yeah, become a patron if you want to, if you can afford it. If you can't, no problem. And everyone out there, please take care of yourself because you deserve it. You really, really do.